I've got my little seed up here, which none of you are going to be able to see, and I'll probably have to come around here for these people around here. Mustard seeds, tiniest seeds ever. I brought it with me just to remind me that I could do this. I can actually do what God has called me to do. All it requires is a tiny bit of faith. And for each of us, all that we are called to do requires the tiniest bit of faith that can turn into something unexpected, something amazing, something good. So I hope that you've been encouraged through the series so far about by faith and the things that we can do alongside God by faith. Who here watched Indiana Jones' Last Crusade after Adam spoke about it last week? Oh, Adam, you didn't really empower them to watch this. Well, I'm going to share a little bit more, so hopefully it doesn't ruin the movie for you. But you should watch it. It's an amazing movie. And the scene that Adam talked about was when Indy takes this leap of faith. And in that scene, I'll just back up a little bit. He's there after the Last Crusade is to find the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail, according to the belief that they had, was that if somebody would drink from that, they would have eternal life, that they would live forever here on earth. And so just before Indy enters into this pathway that he has to go, his dad's been shot. His dad who he's reconnected with, his dad who he loves, and he's dying. And they're so close to finding this Holy Grail that they've been searching for so long. There are many obstacles to overcome for him to get to that place. Obstacles that are dangerous, obstacles that have killed many who have gone before him. It's going to require wisdom, understanding. It's going to require Indy to remember what he believed to be true in order to be able to get there. And there's going to be some specific steps that he needs to follow. This particular challenge, the leap of faith, is the last one of 3 that he's done. So he's very close to be able to get this Holy Grail. It's a step that he actually can't see, and he stands on this cliff. I think there's a couple of images up there where he's about to just put his foot out and step into nothingness, into an abyss that is below him. And as he's about to do it and he's standing there, his dad calls out, "Indy, hurry." And so propelled by love, he takes one deep breath and he takes that step of faith. And as he does, something solid appears beneath him. It's a narrow pathway. It's a small pathway. And most of us take a sigh of relief that he's not going to fall. But me, I'm like, there's no way I'm walking across that narrow pathway. I perhaps have a fear of heights. I'm reminded of the Shrek movie where Donkey is going across a bridge, a rickety bridge, and he's scared. And Shrek yells out, "Don't look down, Donkey. Focus on me." And so this sense of being able to focus on somebody that we trust when we walk this narrow pathway will actually be the thing that can lead us to the place where we too will find eternal life. To stay on the narrow path is actually going to require focus. It's going to require looking to the person that we can trust the most in all of life's situations. It's a narrow pathway, but it's one that Jesus invites his followers to join him on. And it's also one that those that we've read about over the last few weeks in Hebrews 11 have travelled along. They, like Indy, actually weren't perfect people, and I love that, because often we put heroes up on a pedestal and we think there's no way I could do what they're doing. But they were people just like us, people whose faith was focused on something that they could not see, yet they believed it to be true. Verse 35 says that they placed their hope in a better life. This is exactly what Indy was doing, placing his hope that this would bring healing to his dad and would actually make his life better. They placed their hope in a life that was beyond their current circumstances. It also says in that same verse that they refused to turn from God. They remained clinging to him. They remained focused on him, living by faith, trusting till the end, trusting, believing, knowing, faith in, as Adam would say. I thought that was a new word, but I actually looked it up in the dictionary and it's there. I thought Adam had made it up, so there you go. He's not making up words, which is good. It's in the Collins Dictionary actually defined as the practice of a faith. So practicing that which we believe in, which means putting it into action, trusting that what we're doing has a purpose, that what we're doing is true. So we all have faith in something. Each one of you had faith in the chair that you sit in, that it wouldn't collapse. Perhaps you have faith in us that we maintain these well. We do, hopefully. Nobody's fallen down this morning. I have faith that the sun will rise every morning. I have faith that my alarm clock will wake me up after the sun has risen, because I'm not one of those 8:30 in the morning people. So I have faith in that until it doesn't work. And then my faith wavers a little bit and I'll give it another go. But if it keeps on happening, then my faith in my alarm clock will begin to get lost. I'm no longer going to trust that that is actually going to help me. Adam talked last week about faith is being able to lean on something or somebody that is solid, that is trustworthy, that will actually hold us up in the times where we need it. See, Indy in this movie was leaning on, trusting in what he believed to be true. It was his little black book that he had, and within that book contained his father's notes. We all have a little black book as well. Now, they come in all different colours now, actually. You can get quite pretty colours, but we have a book that have the words of our Father in them as well. His book was full of historical facts, full of truths, same as our little black book, full of facts, historical truths that have happened. See, faith for followers of Christ is not just in the book. It is in the Word. It is in Jesus, who is the Word, who is the truth, who is the life. So far, God hasn't let me down. The sun still comes up every morning. But there have been seasons in my life, and perhaps yours as well, where my faith hasn't been as strong as I would have actually liked it to be. Disappointing things have happened. Things that I'd hoped for didn't happen. And things that I hoped wouldn't happen did happen. Times where I have trusted in my own ways, where I've made my own decisions, where I've gone ahead of God, and they've led me down the wrong pathways. What I appreciate about the Hebrews 11 chapter is that each of these people, these faith-filled people, also encountered disappointments. What they had hoped for didn't happen, not in the way they imagined anyway. For 40 years, they wandered around the wilderness. That journey should have taken 11 days, yet for 40 years, they wandered. Sarah actually lost patience waiting for her promised child and decided that she'd take it in her own hands and produce her own plans. Moses was a murderer and on a couple of occasions actually refused to obey God, turning towards his own needs and his own desires. The people of Israel worshipped idols, turning away from God and turning towards what it was that they wanted. David committed adultery and had the woman's husband killed so that he wouldn't be caught. Each of these people appear in this chapter that we title Heroes of Faith, because in the midst of it, their mustard-sized seed of faith kept them going. The fact that they hung on to God in the midst of everything that was happening in their life. But like each of us, well, maybe it's just me, they were not perfect. Their examples of faith are very real. Yet through it all, they kept on faithing, trusting in God and his faithfulness towards them. They refused to turn from him. They kept hoping for a better future, putting one foot in front of the other foot. Their weaknesses turned into strength. Their faith, a growing faith, growing through each trial, through each victory, in every season. If you took the time to trace the lives of all those people that were written in that one chapter, you'd be able to see how they grew in faith. You would see a familiar pathway, a narrow road, a focused life, one requiring one small step at a time. It's a pathway that we too can follow. It's one that Jesus actually describes to us in Matthew 7:14. He says, "But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So growing in faith. When we think about growing, we often think about things getting larger, things getting bigger, wider. Yet here Jesus uses these words: small, narrow, few, leads to life. Narrow is the way. Small is the gate. The gate here is referring to Jesus. One way on this road. One person to focus on. Narrow is the road. Jesus is saying, walk this road with me. Look at me. Focus on me. Don't get distracted by the things that are surrounding you, the things that are drawing you away from this road. Because this road, as narrow as it is, it actually leads to a full life, an abundant life Jesus talks about, an expansive life. Like Indy's road that he walked along, small and narrow, but it was the only one that was going to take him to where he needed to go. It was the one that led to healing, one that would lead to restoration, one that would lead to him growing in his faith as he saw the things that he believed in were actually true. See, growing in faith is not about the amount of faith that we have, but it's about the focus of that faith. The passage that Adam read in verse 11 is actually the end. It's a bit cheating going to the end to see how it actually happens, but I might be one of those people that reads the end of the book first just to make sure it's okay. But here we see what held their focus, what actually led them to have a growing, mature faith. See, by faith, they did and saw amazing things. When you read that verse, the things that they did, the things that they have seen, the miracles that they have seen God do. But they also encountered disappointing. I'd say probably a bit more disappointing, sort in half. I'd say that's probably a bit traumatic. Hard things that they went through. Being persecuted. Many things that they endured. But we're told in verse 34 that it's at the time that they were weakest that it was actually turned into a strength for them. We are told that they were refused to turn from God, even when imprisoned, even when facing death. They refused to turn from God, placing their focus, their hope in a better life, a life after the resurrection, something beyond this world. A big picture faith is actually a focused faith, and it actually requires mustard-sized seeds. Matthew 17:20 says, "I tell you the truth." Just let that sink in for a minute. I tell you the truth. if you have faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. Here's another illustration Jesus used. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in a field. It's the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of garden plants. It grows into a tree, and birds come and make nests in its branches. So it's not the amount of faith that we have. It's a focus of this faith. It's a focus on God and his ability to do the things that we cannot do. I haven't met anyone yet that can move a mountain, but God can. The mustard seed, as small as this tiny dot that you can't even see, contains the potential to do the impossible, because God put that potential in that seed. When we place our faith in Jesus, in who he is and what he offers us, we learn that nothing is impossible. The popular misconception about faith is a tendency to believe that we need all of the answers, that we need to believe the right things, do the right things before we even act. Yet faith is not about knowing everything. It's about knowing the one who does know everything. The more I grow in my faith, in my relationship with God, the more I realise that I know way less than I thought I did. Leading me to conclude that the fewer things, the things that I am absolutely certain about God's character, about who he is, about what Jesus has done for me, is the things that most require my attention. The other things can distract me from the narrow path. The fewer focused things are the things that are worthy of our attention. A mature faith has a capacity to live with ambiguities, paradoxes, the mysteries of the spiritual life and of the human experience. A mature, growing faith has the capacity to appreciate where God can ultimately not be understood or comprehended, because God is God and we are not. And it is only God that can move a mountain. Faith is trust and obedience when we don't understand, perhaps especially in those times. The questioning, the whats and the whys, and what do I actually believe, can actually lead to growth, done in the right environment, around the right people. It brings our wandering focus back to who God is, that God is love, that God is good, that God is kind, and that God does care for those he created. It brings us back that he is the one that set the sun and the moon in the sky. He's the one that makes the sun rise every day. He's the one who made the mountains. He's the one that created you, full of potential. So Jesus also used that illustration of the mustard seed to help us understand what the kingdom of heaven looks like, because this should be our focus, that we were born with eternity planted in our hearts. We were not created for this world, but for something bigger and something better than that. So in this illustration that Jesus uses about the mustard seed planted in a field, becoming one of the largest of garden plants and then growing into a tree where birds come and make nests, is that he's actually speaking to the Jewish people of the time who believed that when the kingdom of God came and was established on earth, it would be something amazing and great and large, and people wouldn't miss it. There'd be this mighty army that would come and take over. Yet they weren't prepared for such an insignificant, small beginning Although it had been prophesied, and they knew these prophecies, they weren't prepared that that small mustard seed would be a child born among them. See, they had lost focus. They missed God coming to them. A small thing that was growing among them, like that insignificant plant that the mustard seed turned into. They missed it. It says in there that that plant actually turned into a tree. And Jesus, this child, growing up, insignificant, there's a moment when all of a sudden he's not. He walks out of the wilderness and begins to do the impossible things. So the reality is, mustard seeds actually don't grow into trees. And so what they expected Jesus to grow into was something completely different. Yet he grew and he became, well, he already was God, but he was seen for who he actually was at this point. Somebody who revealed God's kingdom, somebody who revealed God's character, somebody who was full of justice, hope, providing shelter for those who needed it, like that big tree. Something small and insignificant turned into something unexpected and incredible. Yet the people, the religious people of the day, missed it because they were focused on what they believed should be happening. The pathway to a growing faith is a narrow, focused pathway. It's a challenge, and it may look different to what you expected it to look like. That path might take a really sharp turn that you weren't expecting. But when we're focused on God, we will follow that path. See, it's a choice that requires action, but it's also one small step at a time. It's trusting, it's hoping, it's faith in someone beyond ourselves, someone who has something better in mind for us. Hebrews 11:39 and 40. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. Do you notice the language changes at the end there to us? That's including us now. They earned a good reputation because of their faith. So when we have faith, the smallest of faith, we're told earlier in that verse that it pleases God. So they trusted in God's promises, even when they didn't see them, even when they weren't fulfilled in their lifetime. And that promise, the promise that they didn't see fulfilled, was Jesus, the fulfillment of God's plan. We live this side of history where we actually know that Jesus came. He was born among us. He died. He came back to life. He was resurrected. That is our truth. That is our focus that we hold on to. Yet God still had something bigger, something better, something worth waiting for, not just for them, but for us. In this verse, he's talking about the unity of all believers. It's something that Jesus still sits at the right hand of the Father and prays for. That anyone that believes in him, that together in unity, when Jesus comes again, all things will be made new. That's our hope. That's our focus. That's the thing that we may not see come through in our lifetime, but it's something that we know is true. See, for a seed to grow, there are certain conditions that are needed, even for the smallest of seeds. And it's the same for faith. There's things that are needed. We need the right soil. We need the right situation and we need the right saturation. Seeds need soil preparation. You can't just stick a seed into the hardest of soil and expect that it would grow. Sometimes it does because God generously waters that seed and it does grow. But to have the best results, for something to grow, then we actually need to prepare the soil. And faith is no different. If we consider the heart, the soil of our life, then there's heart preparation that needs to happen in order for those seeds to grow. It's wondering about what we do believe. It's bringing our focus back. It's asking, maybe digging a bit deeper in that soil and saying, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I respond? And maybe it's turning the ground over a little bit and asking those deeper questions. For some of us, our hearts become hard because of disappointments, because of things that have happened, because people have let us down, and some maybe even feel that God has let us down. And our hearts can become hard. And there's a breaking of those hearts that sometimes needs to happen. Sometimes there's some resting that needs to happen. When we've been through a whole lot of stuff, the Bible refers to that as the fallow ground, where it rests for 12 months, ready for the next thing. So we need to prepare ourselves to walk on this journey of faith. We also need to make sure that we've got the right situation, that we're actually in the right place at the right time for God to be able to grow in us. Perhaps that's different spaces where you connect, whether it's online here, whether it's life groups, grow groups, women's retreats, prayer retreats, men's things, in a smaller space where you can begin to break up some of that fallow ground. And you can actually take those smaller steps of maybe asking someone to pray for you, asking somebody to help you, praying to God again when perhaps that's not been something that you've done because you've felt let down. It's a small step. And finally, the right saturation, where Christ becomes the main thing, the one thing, the focus of our lives, the one that we are following. So if your heart is prepared and you're growing, how do you continue to grow? What are the next small steps to be able to do that? Perhaps you don't know Christ. Perhaps you're not aware of this, but you'd just like to ask some more questions. Then finding a place that you could do that. Finding a person you could do that with. Perhaps for you, saturation feels like worship. Saturation feels like study. We're all different and there's all different ways that we connect with God. Perhaps it's out in creation. But what are the steps that you will do to grow in your faith? Just a small step, the size of a mustard seed. The sun will come up again tomorrow and it will be a new day where we can have a renewed focus, new faith opportunities. God shows us grace and love and understanding. A small step on a narrow pathway that leads to an expansive, fruitful, eternal life is something that we can do. As we follow Jesus, we will impact the world. Let me pray.